Welcome back to the Explainer. Today we are jumping right into part 2 of an incredibly useful 8-part tutorial titled IPv6 Troubleshooting for System Administrators and Technical Support. This material comes to us straight from Virtualization Options LLC, which is a really sharp technology research and advisory group based out of Colorado. Now, since this is designed specifically for sysadmins and tech support folks who are actively migrating their organizations from IPv4 to IPv6, we are going to focus entirely on Chapter 2 of their guide today. Our main goal? Figuring out how to effectively troubleshoot IPv6 by literally unlearning all of that IPv4 muscle memory you've built up over the years. We're doing a total baseline reset here, so let's get into it. Here's a quick look at our agenda for today. First, we'll talk about unlearning IPv4. Then we dive into the dual-stack reality, followed by connecting with NDP and RAs. Next up is ICMPv6 and PMTUD, and we'll wrap things up by navigating transition traps and laying out some golden rules. All right, Section 1, Unlearning IPv4, the paradigm shift. So, our very first major hurdle is letting go of the comfort of a single IP address. You know, you're used to just seeing 192.168.0.10 on a machine and calling it a day, right? Well, with IPv6, you are going to see multiple, simultaneous addresses on a single interface. It is completely 100% normal to have a link local address, a global unicast address, and maybe even a few temporary privacy addresses, all sitting there active at the exact same time. You literally have to train yourself to stop looking at that and thinking it's a configuration error. It's simply how the protocol works. And that brings us to a massive architectural contrast. If your immediate troubleshooting reflex is to just ping 255.255.255.255 to see what's breathing on your subnet, yeah, you can go ahead and forget that. Broadcast is essentially dead in IPv6. It's completely gone, replaced entirely by multicast. And because pretty much every single device can be globally routable now, NAT is largely out of the picture. This isn't just a minor tweak. This completely flips your firewall designs and your security assumptions totally upside down.
Moving right along to Section 2, the dual-stack reality and connecting.
Okay, this right here is crucial to understand. In a dual-stack setup, a broken IPv6 path might actually hide behind a perfectly working IPv4 network. When IPv6 fails, you almost never get a clean, obvious connection error. Instead, browsers use a clever mechanism called happy eyeballs. Basically, they prefer IPv6, they try it first, and if it hangs, they race it against IPv4 after a tiny delay. So what does that mean for you? It means a broken IPv6 path is secretly slapping a 250 millisecond latency penalty on literally every single connection attempt. Your end users aren't going to put in a ticket saying the network is down. They're just going to complain that the internet feels incredibly sluggish. Now, to understand how an IPv6 device even establishes its presence on a network, since we don't have IPv4's ARP anymore, we really need to look at duplicate address detection, or DAD for short. Before any IPv6 address can actually pass traffic, the host has to prove that it is absolutely unique on the local segment. It does this by pinging out a neighbor solicitation for its tentative address to a specialized multicast group. But what happens if DAD actually fails? Well, this 3-step process shows you exactly how a device can silently lose all global connectivity. The host initiates the check, right? But if another machine responds, boom, a conflict is detected. The interface immediately flags that address as DAD failed and leaves it stuck in this weird, unusable, tentative state. We see this all the time in virtual environments where somebody cloned a VM, left the MAC addresses exactly the same, and accidentally generated identical IPv6 addresses. So if you've got no connectivity, checking for that DAD failed flag is absolutely step 1. Here's another total paradigm shift. Unlike the explicit DHCP leases we all know from IPv4, your default gateway in IPv6 is dynamically discovered through router advertisements, or RAs. If those RAs get blocked, say by a misconfigured port security policy or RA guard, your host will silently and instantly drop its default route. Poof, gone. There is no explicit gateway renewal here. In fact, if your router sends an RA with a lifetime of 0, it is explicitly telling clients, hey, stop using me as a gateway immediately. All right, let's jump into Section 3, ICMPv6 and PMTUD discovery. You are going to love this one. It's a classic network engineering mystery. You try to ping a server, and those tiny little ping packets go through perfectly. But the absolute second you try to do anything useful with larger packets, like open an SSH session, load an HTTPS site, or copy a file, the connection just hangs dead right after the TCP handshake.
Sound familiar? In the IPv6 world, this points almost exclusively to a path MTU discovery, or PMTUD, black hole. Let's trace the exact anatomy of how this stall actually happens. So, your host sends a large IPv6 packet out into the world. Somewhere down the line, a router tries to push it across a link with a smaller MTU limit. That router does its job. It generates an ICMPv6 packet too big warning, which is a type 2 message, and fires it back to the source so it knows to shrink its packet size. But here is the kicker. An overly strict, badly configured firewall somewhere drops that type 2 message dead in its tracks. The source never gets the memo to shrink the packets, and the connection just hangs there in total silence.
To prevent these silent black holes, you absolutely must memorize this table. These are the mandatory ICMPv6 types that your firewalls are structurally required to permit. Listen, ICMPv6 is not some optional extra. It is the absolute foundation of the protocol. You have to permit type 1 for errors, type 2 for that critical PMTUD we just talked about, type 3 for traceroute, and types 133 through 137 for neighbor discovery. If you block these, you break address resolution, you break routing, and you break multicast. It's really that simple. Moving into Section 4, Transition Traps and VPNs. So when you are trying to bridge modern IPv6 clients over to legacy IPv4 servers, NAT64 and DNS64 are actually brilliant tools. DNS64 spins up fake AAAA records to trick the client, and NAT64 handles the actual packet translation at the gateway. But man, they can fail silently in a few really frustrating ways. The DNS server might choke and fail to return those synthesized records, or the NAT64 gateway might just completely run out of addresses in its pool. But you know what the worst failure is? Applications that unwisely use hard-coded IPv4 literals. If a legacy app tries to connect directly to 1.2.3.4, it completely bypasses DNS64 entirely and just shatters the connection right there. Which brings us to a massive, massive headache for help desks everywhere. Why on earth does connecting to the corporate VPN suddenly shatter a remote worker's local IPv6 access? From the user's perspective, it just feels entirely random. Well, the truth is, legacy VPNs, like older IPsec clients or early versions of AnyConnect, usually fail in one of two catastrophic ways when they encounter IPv6. Option 1, they dangerously leak all of your IPv6 traffic completely outside the secure tunnel, exposing your real IP and bypassing all your corporate security policies. Or option 2, they just blindly block all local IPv6 traffic without actually offering a route through the tunnel. And because of that happy eyeballs feature we talked about earlier, that total block means dual-stack websites will either hang entirely or fail back incredibly slowly to IPv4. Okay, final stretch, Section 5, Golden Rules for IPv6 Troubleshooting. If you take absolutely nothing else away from this explainer today, make sure you write these rules down. Number 1, never ever block ICMPv6 entirely. It will literally break your network. Number 2, when a user reports a problem, always test your IPv4 and IPv6 stacks completely independently. Use commands like curl-6 and curl-4. Number 3, train your brain to expect multiple IP addresses on a single interface. It's totally normal now. Number 4, learn your new neighbor discovery tools. IP-6NA is about to become your new best friend. And finally, document your delegated prefixes. Because if your ISP decides to silently change your prefix, all of your static configurations are going to break with absolutely zero warning. So as you head back to your server racks, your firewalls, and your routing tables, the ultimate question really is, are you finally ready to stop treating IPv6 like it's just a bigger version of IPv4? You've got to master these dual-stack realities, but definitely stay on your toes. Remember, this was just Chapter 2 of an 8-part tutorial. If transition traps and silent latency killers are lurking here, what on earth do you think is waiting for us in Chapter 3? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and happy troubleshooting out there.